Welcome to the TELUS Originals DocTalks, a series of talks dedicated to craft, themes, and ideas behind TELUS Originals documentaries with the people behind and in front of the camera. I'm your host, Sabrina Rani Furminger. And for this episode, we'll be talking to Jenny Lee-Gilmore about Overtime. Overtime is, in many ways, a sports documentary, and its protagonist is one we've rarely seen portrayed in the sports documentary sphere, a 60-year-old Chinese-Canadian woman. Kelly Lee-Gilmore is a remarkable person who wears many hats and, indeed, helmets. Mother, wife, PhD doctor, university professor, and hockey player. The documentary delves into her lifelong relationship with hockey and her journey navigating the male-dominated world of hockey as a Chinese-Canadian woman. We bear witness as Kelly gears up to compete at the national level for Team BC Wolfpack in the Canada 55-plus games in Kamloops. We also bear witness to the loving relationship between an inspiring and humble mother and a talented daughter who wants to share her mother's story with the world, as well as the reciprocal relationship between the sport of hockey and the players who love it. So, while Overtime is indeed a sports documentary, it's also a documentary about relationships, passion, and so much more. To use the parlance of the hockey world, our captain in this journey is that aforementioned talented daughter, Jenny Lee-Gilmore. Jenny is an actor and filmmaker based in Vancouver. She completed her BFA in film production at the University of British Columbia in 2019. Her debut short film, Breakaway, which was inspired by her mom's childhood growing up hockey-obsessed in 1970s Vancouver, played in festivals across North America and was selected in the top 9 of 2020's CBC Short Film Face Off. Overtime earned her a One to Watch award from the venerable Vancouver Film Critics Circle. She was a member of the 2021 VIF Catalyst Mentorship Program, BIPOC TV and Film Showrunner Bootcamp, 2023 GEMS TV Producer Lab, and the Women in the Director's Chair Story and Leadership Program. Woo, that's a lot. She's also in post-production with CBC Short Doc, Little Miss Sleepy, and the BC Arts Council-funded narrative short, The Forgotten Notes. She's also currently writing a horror feature titled Dormant and co-writing the feature drama Mixed Feelings. Jenny is passionate about telling female-centric and Asian Canadian stories that are often overlooked or neglected by mainstream media and strives to create meaningful and authentic stories that resonate with audiences. Today, we're going to speak with Jenny about all of this important work. Jenny Lee-Gilmore, welcome to TELUS Originals DocTalks.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thanks for having me. I'm also realizing I should shorten my bio. I can't
No way.
read all of that.
There's so much there. And today we're going to talk about a lot of it and how you're a genre hopper and obviously about your mom and the ways that she has inspired your work, because I did watch Breakaway as well as this documentary.
Wow.
But before we do anything else, I want to speak with you about your own journey with hockey. What role has it played and what role does it play in your life?
So I started playing hockey when I was 11 years old, and I actually lived in England at the time, which I don't have an accent anymore, but in Overtime you can hear it. And
You totally did.
But yeah, I started playing. It was something my mom and I did together. She would take my brother and I to go skating, and I really loved it. And then when we moved to Canada, that's when I first joined the girls team, because there's a lot of girls hockey here. And I played all throughout high school. It was something to keep me fit. It was really fun, all the girls on the team, traveling for tournaments. And then it's been a big part of my mom and I's relationship as well. And then today, I don't play on a team full time, but I occasionally will sub on my mom's team still, and we'll be D partners. So I make some appearances on her team as well.
That is incredible. Growing up, I mean, back when you were 11 years old and you first started playing hockey, did you realize how impressive your mother was and is? You know, that you had a mom who, person of color, male dominated sport, and is like playing hockey, defying the odds. When you were a kid, did you know that your mom was incredibly rad?
That's a good question. I feel, I don't think I did. I knew she was very different from a lot of the moms and my friends' moms at school. I didn't know anyone else who played hockey, but I do remember having like this very vivid memory of being at a public skate and this little boy coming up to my mom and being like, "Those are such cool skates," and she got them in Canada and brought them back to the UK. And then I was like, "Huh." So all these like other boys are thinking my mom is pretty cool. But I think it wasn't until I got older that I realized she's pretty rad. Said.
Absolutely. I mean, I could have used other words, but I after spending time with and I feel like I've spent time with your mom, through this film, like I would say incredibly rad woman. So, I mean, I want to talk about the inspiration for this film. I mean, obviously I can see the ways that, your mother would inspire you to want to make, this particular film. But tell me about, how this documentary journey began, because as I said in the intro, you had already made a film project, that was fictional or inspired by, about your mom. So why documentary?
It's another good question. I never expected I would go into documentary. I think in film school, it was very, or at least for me, it was very narrative focused. But when my mom started telling me about this hockey tournament and that it was 55 plus and all her teammates are these women over 55, I just thought, wow, what a interesting story. And that would just make a great film. Like I'd love to go and film it. And at the time it was, I had no money to make it. It was really kind of just this dream that I said, maybe I can film it. And then the tournament got pushed because of the pandemic. And then that's when I started thinking, oh, maybe I have some more time to maybe put together a crew. And this could be something we film. And it could be a way to tell my mom's story. And documentary happened to be the genre and the vehicle in which to do that.
Now, as we see it in the documentary, your mom is very humble and very much sees herself as one of many. I mean, it's very much the team, I guess, the team player nature of things, but she is one of many who breaks barriers. What kind of conversations did you need to have with your mom, to convince her to share her personal story in this way?
Well, what's funny is that at first when I was pitching this film, it was not a mother-daughter story in any way. It was not a story really where my mom was the lead. It was about the team. And it was very much a fly on the wall, kind of like the regular sports docs where you follow a team and you follow multiple players. And that's what I actually first pitched to TELUS Originals. And then the feedback from Ken was, well, actually, I think the unique part here is that it's your mom, and that is the story that will be more intriguing and more universal. So I then had to go back to my mom and be like, they are interested in following your team, but they would like you to kind of be the lead and to talk more about your life. And at first she was very excited but hesitant. She didn't want it to seem like she was trying to hog the spotlight or to take anything away from her teammates. But I just told her, I was like, this is a really unique opportunity for us and for me to tell your story. Doesn't mean that's taking away anything from your teammates, but I think this is what is going to be the special part of this film. And then she's like, oh, okay. She kind of got on board. But that was a big thing throughout the film. It was like she was nervous to be the star and be the lead.
Yeah.
And was constantly like, will people care? Do people care about her story? And that was something we navigated together.
Yeah. And, for you then going into the documentary sphere for the first time. And not just that, also telling a personal story, which adds also another layer of, I'm assuming, challenges, joys, but also challenges. What did you do, or who did you have in your corner to speak to through that process?
It was definitely challenging, but also really, it helped a lot because it is my mom. So I had access to her kind of 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to start from ground zero building this relationship in order to ask her certain questions that may show up in the film. So kind of our pre-production was just us chatting about her life, and there was never any sort of awkwardness around that. So that was really great. But then during filming, it's hard because I'm trying to direct the film and I have, dealing with budget and logistics. And I never want my mom to be aware of any kind of stresses on that side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also trying to protect her emotionally so she can come to set and just feel ready to share whatever she wants to share. Yeah. So trying to be there emotionally for her and the crew was tricky. But I had a great team. I mean, Mike Johnston from Studio 104 and then Martin Calvo as well, who was producing. It felt great to have them, dealing with a lot of the things. So it's really a team effort. But I will say it was challenging kind of bouncing back and forth between like director hat, producer hat, and then being there for my mom and making sure she's okay.
Yeah, and daughter hat.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, maybe we'll just. This is usually a question I would ask at the end, but I'm wondering now because it's relevant. But is documentary something that you are eager to make, again, and if so, like, do you think it will be different working, telling the story of somebody who is not one of the most important people, in your life?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot recently because I was trying to come up with new ideas for documentaries, and I think I've tapped out my family a bit. Like my brother,
I don't know.
Film. My dad is in the film. I'm like, I don't know if they want me to be in their faces with cameras anymore.
Can I say, as somebody who is mixed race and married to somebody who is Asian and English from Eastbourne in Sussex, that's the story of your parents. Yeah. And also the way that your dad, is so supportive of your mom. Like, I want that story. I also want that love story told in documentary or something. So I don't think you've tapped them out.
Okay, I'll have to go back to him. I'll have to go back to him. He's so sweet, and he is, like my mom says in the film, so supportive. I mean, he was on camera for a bit, but behind the scenes, he was also doing BTS photography, and he was a PA, and he was just making sure everyone was taken care of. So I'm very thankful for my dad. But yeah, documentary, I've kind of fallen in love with it. It's something that, I never thought I would do, but I had fallen in love with it. And it's something very different from narrative. At first, I was very frightened by it because I didn't have a script. I didn't necessarily have a shot list or knowing how the story is going to begin and how it's going to end. You're kind of there waiting to see what unfolds, and you can only plan a certain amount. But that was also very liberating of just kind of showing up and being like, okay, what can we capture today, and then what can we put in the edit in post-production. So it's something I've been exploring more, and I am in post-production right now with another documentary called Little Miss Sleepy with CBC Shorts. And again, my parents are in it. It's even more personal for me because I'm the subject of the film. And it's about my diagnosis with narcolepsy, which is a neurological disorder. So I was diagnosed when I was 21, and currently it has no cure or known cause. And this is something that I explore in the film, and I actually go and participate in a research study where they watch me sleep and study my brain. So this is all caught on camera. I'm like wearing no makeup. I was like looking at the footage today. I was like, oh my God, why did I do this to myself? Like, I look terrible, but it's part of the process. So yeah, still going in the doc space. Yeah.
Wow. I just love that you're the kid. I mean, you're not a kid, but I'm imagining, you as like, because I just watched Breakaway, and I'm imagining, you as in that, the kid, your mom's role. but you're the kid with like the camera who's like, there's a thing going on in the family, or there's a thing going on in my life. I got to film it. I got to explore it in film. Okay. And we're going to talk about all of your work and contextualize, this in this film, in the rest of your work. But before we do it, let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of Overtime. Take us to that, to the tournament itself. One of the things that was so remarkable, about the way that the film was structured is that, first we get to really know your mom, who is like, as I say, rad, this multi-hyphenate, thrives in so many different parts of her life, and then we get to go up to Kamloops, and meet all of these other 55 plus women who, like your mom, have had lifelong relationships, with hockey, and then all sorts of, other things that, set them apart from each other. What are some of what threads did you see that ran between all of these women, besides the passion for hockey, and the conversations that you had with them? What were some of the things that really came out to you, about what these women have in common?
Well, as you said, they're all 55 plus, so they grew up pretty much in the same kind of era as each other. And there's a lot of intersectionalities just within the film in terms of race, gender, class, and access to hockey. And I think most of the women in the film started hockey or wanted to play hockey when there wasn't really any girls hockey. They didn't have equal access to ice time, to coaching, to resources. So a lot of them have really kind of started playing or learned to play without much help from anyone. And you see in the film, Gwen, the coach of the Wolfpack, was really a pioneer in fighting for equal ice time for girls hockey. So they all had this love of a sport that didn't necessarily accept them back. So that was something I found similar. And then now, as well, as they're all a certain age, is they all have lives outside of hockey as well. Like they have families and jobs, or maybe they're retired, and hockey has become kind of a second family to them, something to do outside of their regular lives. And I love that, seeing their friendships as well, and how much hockey was a social aspect to them as well.
Yeah. How much of the time up in Kamloops was, and maybe the expectations, that you brought? Because obviously everybody goes up, and they want to win. And we won't do too much spoiler talk, I guess, for people who have watched the documentary yet. But, like things don't necessarily go according to, the plan. Like what kind of disappointments either did you have as a filmmaker or expectations, like when you're following people in these moments where they're going up, to play in a championship, and, they like the goal, I'm assuming, for everybody is you want to take gold, and then things don't necessarily, go as plans. Like what how did that impact, either how the sensitivity with which you were filming, or the expectations, around that you were bringing to, this is how the film is gonna close? Like, to tell me about that. I'm sorry, it's such a vague question, but it's kind of like a choose your own adventure question, really.
It is, and that's kind of going into the film. We didn't know the outcome of the games. That was something really hard to plan. We knew they were going to have 2 games. If they win or lose, they move into the next round, and we also didn't know what time they were playing either. So because if they won a game, they play at this time. If they lost a game, they play at this time. So it was very much just kind of waiting to see how it unfolded. And of course, everyone, like you said, wants to win, and I don't want to spoil it. But for me, I want my mom to be happy. And but there is certain points in the film where narratively, I'm like, oh, this is actually really great. I know you're upset, but narratively, this is going to be a great little, like, peak and valley. Like, we're going into the valley now, and that makes it more entertaining and like the emotional journey of the games. But it was hard. It was hard because a lot of them hadn't been on camera before, so we didn't want to disrupt their flow of how they're going to play. I know my mom says she was nervous playing in front of the camera, and she didn't play as well as she usually does, and felt a bit like a lot of pressure. So I know that was an aspect of it, and we just tried to be respectful in general of filming. We were going into their changing room before and after games, making sure they really are in the right mindset for the game, and then we go on. Like, the most important thing really is that they all feel good about their hockey game, and we will capture what we can. But the priority is them and how they're going to play. If that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
You know what? I mean, it does, but like if it didn't, that's totally fine because my question wasn't that clear anyways. Tell me about some of the memorable, days of filming or quote unquote scenes. Do we talk about scenes in documentaries?
Yeah.
Scenes? Yeah.
Sure.
I think the most memorable, days or scenes, to film, both for you as filmmaker and also as daughter and daughter filmmaker, because I guess you can't separate yourself.
No, not no. I think one of the most memorable days as a filmmaker was probably our last day of filming, where we rented out an ice rink and we were trying to capture these very cinematic moments of my mom on the ice, because we see a lot of these kind of epic sports shots with men, particularly, usually Caucasian men. And we kind of wanted to emulate those, but then have, my mom, who's a 60-year-old Chinese Canadian woman. So that was really fun. And then we had a great crew that day as well, who had shot a lot of famous hockey players. My mom was really excited. And then as a daughter, I think it's more of an overall feeling from the tournament was seeing how close my mom actually got with the crew and how invested the crew were in the tournament and in the women on the team. That was really nice to see. And just having my dad there as well, like the whole family. The tournament was great. It was stressful, like trying to film and all that, but I think overall the tournament, it was just really fun.
Yeah. What about difficult days of filming or scenes to film? What were some of those for you?
All of the hockey games are pretty difficult to shoot. We didn't get to location scout anything before we went, so my cinematographer Diana Perry, we would just look at photos of the ice rink and kind of plan where we may put the cameras, because obviously we can't go on the ice when they're playing, and we had to pick strategic ways to try capture everything, because you can't get them to do it again. If you miss a moment, you miss a moment. And then we also need things to cut to, so we just had 2 cameras going for both games and then a GoPro on the bench. But that was tricky because we were a small team. We can't control any of the lighting. Some of the boards and the glass, like the windows, are really scuffed up, so you can really see through it. So that was tricky overall. It was just being in a space we never shot in or had time to plan for.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah.
What about difficult days as a daughter then? Because that's very much you broke it into filmmaker and daughter in that memorable question. What about for this one?
Oh, I think some of the interviews were hard for me because I want to probe with questions that will make my mom open up. But it's always an odd experience seeing your parent upset or cry. And it's for me as a daughter, I'm a bit like, oh, I don't want to go there. But that was a little uncomfortable, but also my mom was a little nervous as well to do that, but I think it's also really brave how vulnerable she was and to share that much about her life. So that was definitely tricky, especially, I don't want to give too many spoilers, like emotional times for me where I was like, don't cry. And I don't want to be heard on camera crying, but of course it's my mom, so it makes me emotional. Yeah. But I will say that those days were made so much better by the crew. And why I feel it's so important in documentary to pick your crew really well, because a lot of this crew were people I met in film school, and they knew my mom already. My mom sort of knew them. So she also felt comfortable to go to these places. And I felt okay letting her in front of this crew because it was a safe place for her to do that. And I think, Diana, the DP, was also crying for most of those interviews as well. So it just felt like a very safe place to be uncomfortable.
I, as a viewer, was crying as well, so I'm glad that we were rolling with everybody together.
Crying.
Everybody's, but it's a good cleansing kind of cry. you talk a lot in the film. Your mom talks a lot in the film, and we've also talked today about how male dominated the world of hockey is. And it's also been very there have not been a lot of people of color playing hockey as well. It's a lot better than it was, but from your perspective, is the world of hockey, is it a safe place for BIPOC people? Is it better than it was? Like, what did you learn about that, through the conversations that you had with your mom making this film?
That's a interesting question, because I think there's a big difference between professional hockey and then recreational hockey. I mean, of course, we do not see a lot of representation in professional hockey, although it is changing. And we've seen, there was a South Asian player that came out for the Canucks, which is awesome.
Thanks.
So yeah, we're seeing those changes, but very slowly. In terms of recreational hockey, again, there's small changes, but I still think it's a very white male masculine sport. I'm not sure if I can really comment on the safety, because I haven't had any personal experiences, and I'm not really in that world actively right now.
Yeah.
But
I mean, when I say safety, I mean even just like the ability to feel comfortable, and to like play your best self and stuff, right? Like feeling comfortable, makes you feel, or I mean, I'm not an athlete by any means, so I can only put it in like arts kind of things, but it like when you feel, that you're in a safe place where people aren't judging you or they're accepting you or whatever, then like if it's for me in a choir, then I feel like I can really sing out.
And I
love sports stories. I can barely. I have no idea what's going on though. Yeah,
it's yeah. What am I trying to say? Sports has always been, I think, at least for me, a place where I go to try feel some sort of safety, and I haven't always necessarily felt that. Especially when I lived in the UK, I played on an all-boys team. I was also the only, non-white, fully white person. And I used to change in like an equipment closet because there was no girls' dressing rooms. So I think at least, sports should be a place where everyone can come. And it's supposed to be empowering, at least on the level of recreation. You're not playing for money or for performance. You're there to have fun as well. And I think that's, just so important for young people getting into the sport. And I like to think it is changing. I think it is.
Yeah, I think I think so too. And your film can be part of pushing ideas forward that that anybody who has the passion and the desire to work as well can find a home in this world. I want to talk about lessons now, because anytime you commit your energy and your passion to something, I mean the opportunity to learn something is there. What did you learn about your mom while making Overtime? Was there anything that she revealed that surprised you?
I think I asked her a lot of questions leading up to this film about things I didn't really know about. I knew a little bit about her childhood and what it was like for her growing up. And a lot of these questions I actually asked for breakaway in terms of, experiences being the middle child and being, a Chinese Canadian girl in the 1970s. So I learned a lot about her resilience growing up. And I think I've always known her as this kind of the woman she is now, which is this, very strong, accomplished person. So hearing how she got there and that she wasn't always that or felt like that was definitely interesting to hear.
Yeah.
I think learning that hockey, I mean, we all know my mom is hockey obsessed, like in the family. Like we will schedule our family dinners if she has it like around her games, So it's to us sometimes we're like, oh, it's a sport, it's just hockey. But learning how much more that means to her, because it's not just a sport. It's her social life. It's empowering. It's something where she truly feels good about herself when she's doing it. So learning that made me understand more, like why she loves the sport so much. And then I think She also was great on camera. I didn't realize how good she was on camera. She always was like nervous about speaking and having interviews on camera, but she was a natural. So I was very impressed and surprised by that.
I'm such a fan of your mom's now. Absolutely. So yes, please tell her that there are a lot of people who think that she's amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me about the experience then of screening the film for your mom for the first time. What was that? What did you feel, going into that, and how did she react?
I was so nervous to play the film for her because, I mean, the whole point of this film is, I say in the film, is to hopefully she can see herself the way I see her. And I want her to obviously like the film and like how I've represented her and like herself in it. So very nervous. I think we did like a little private screening in her house just for her and my family. And the first time she played it, I was kind of watching her and she didn't really say anything. She had a bit of like a couple like tears in her eyes, and then she just wanted to see it again. So she didn't really say much the first time, and then she watched it a second time, and that's what she said. She really, really liked it. So it was, definitely that's what I wanted. I wanted her to approve of it, and she's the star of it. So I want her to be happy with herself in it. Yeah.
Is it hard though to make a film, about your mom and then release it to the world as well? I mean, I'm sure Breakaway, also was its own thing, right? You tell us, but that's a fictionalized story. Like, this is your mother who you love. Is that hard to share her, with the cruel world in this way?
Yeah, it is. It was nerve-wracking, but everyone has been so supportive and so nice and lovely, and the feedback she's got. I think it shows like how important of a story it is and how well received she was. So that made me really happy, but I was nervous, and it's a very vulnerable thing. Well, we shot in her house, we see her house, we talk about her life, we see photos from her childhood. It's just very personal. So yeah, to share anything like that where you get other people's opinions is a little nerve-wracking. But if we haven't really had any negative comments, and if they do, it's like, this film isn't really for them. Mm-hmm. It's for the people that it resonates with, and other female hockey players and young BIPOC women. That's who it's for, and they've been really positive about it. So
yeah. Well, I mean, and I think it's also really powerful too. Like, I'm sitting here in my mid-40s as well, and like every woman over 55 in that film is so much more in shape than I am, and like I'm like, that is so inspiring to me. And also like and it's wonderful to see that kind of representation on screen of people who are more mature, which actually is my way of segueing into my next question. So in recent years, there have been a lot of conversations about diversity and representation, but a lot of those conversations are related to, the narrative film space, the fictional films, namely who we see, behind and in front of the camera. But what does diversity and representation look like in the documentary space? In your view, like, do those same issues exist?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think they do exist. I am new to the documentary world, making documentaries, but I've watched documentaries for a very, very long time. And I think what's so important is that BIPOC filmmakers need to be able to tell their own stories and make their films about themselves. And I don't think that happens as much as it should. I think what I'm learning as I look for my next subjects is, why am I the person to tell this person's story? And what are they? Am I just benefiting off of this person's story and then not giving anything back? I think it's really important in documentary that these are real people's lives that you're representing. They will have to live on after the film, and they will have impacts of the film. So it's the duty of care, I think, to your subjects. And I think a lot of the time people go into a community, tell the story they want to tell about that community, and leave, and then they profit off of that film. But at least for me, I think it's important that, the people who are telling the story are also part of that community, or have done their research and are giving something back. Yeah, and I think that's what was special about Overtime is it's my mom's story, so I felt like the right person to tell it. Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to pull back a little bit. We're going to talk like accusatory. I want to talk about you because you are in some ways a little bit of an enigma. Looking at your list of work, we have the short period drama, the mid-length documentary. There's a horror feature. There's this documentary that you're making about yourself. There's other how do we get there? What is a Jenny Lee-Gilmore film? Who are you? What is happening?
I remember meeting with a producer very early on in my career, and I was like, I don't know if I should just stick to doing drama or if I should just stick to doing this. And I remember him saying, like, don't put yourself in a box before you're forced to be in one. Like, why would you do that to yourself? And I've really lived by that advice. So yes, you see on my resume, I have like every genre nearly possible. But the common thread, I think, is for me is a good story is a good story, regardless of the genre. And usually the stories I like to tell or find interesting are female-led stories, often Asian Canadian women, things that I would want to watch or felt like I didn't have growing up. So I say that is usually the thread between my work. And then now I think it's also becoming making people cry. I feel like all my films make people cry in a good way, I hope. Like it's touching. Yeah. That's what I think for me is like the emotional part of the stories I like to tell. So yeah, I think I watch a lot of every genre. So we're going to try and make films and whatever like serves the story best, really, whatever genre is in best support of that particular story.
With Overtime being your first documentary then, but not your first film, were there any conventions from, the narrative film sphere, that you were able to like take and then use, on your documentary?
Mm-hmm. Well, firstly, this is like my first, I say, like proper film. Mm-hmm. This is a film where I've actually been given money to make a film, which was so exciting. Because all my other films have been student films or passion projects where we've had no resources. Mm-hmm. So that was great just to go in knowing we had a bit more resources. I think it was interesting what you said earlier, like, do I call it a scene? And I think absolutely, like when you're building, at least for me in this documentaries, we're still building scenes and moments and trying to have these emotional beats like you would in narrative. So we wanted a scene of talking about my mom's childhood. That's kind of one scene. And then a scene later talking about what the tournament was like for her. So you're still setting up these worlds where you may not necessarily know what the subjects are going to say, or you don't have a script to follow, but you have an intention going into the interview or the scene of what you're going to talk about and how it's helping your overall story. So it's still, the storytelling aspect has helped me.
I guess for me, when I said I wasn't sure if I should call it scene was, even when I was writing my intro and I wrote protagonist of the documentary, and I had to sit there and be like, is Kelly the protagonist? Or because she's a human being, like protagonist seems like something, that is from, because I was a English major in university, like it seems like, the lead character of a piece of fiction, and like I would be like, if I'm talking about a protagonist, is that like putting, more distance or like dehumanizing, in some way? Yeah. I don't know. Is it interesting?
No, it is like of what
my issues.
Protagonist.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand what you mean, and I loved your intro, by the way. When you were reading it, I was off camera, but I was like, wow, this is such a good. I was like, I need to steal that and start using that for all our Overtime stuff. But yeah, I mean, even like character, like I think people often refer to their documentary subjects as the character,
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about, but they're real people, and you're getting them to talk about their real lives. So
yeah, are there any like trends in documentary filmmaking? Because I mean, we watch a lot of documentaries, but you watch documentaries that were made in like the 90s or the 80s. They're very different from the documentaries that have been made in the last 5 years. Is there anything that you're seeing now, any trend in the documentary sphere that you're like, ooh, I'm excited about that?
Oh, that's interesting. I will say, when I was researching for Overtime and also for Little Miss Sleepy, I was looking at films where the filmmaker is part of the story. So they're not just off camera, and the filmmaker themselves is a character, I guess, in the film. Yeah. And I really enjoy a lot of documentaries that break that fourth wall and acknowledge there's a filmmaker and that the filmmaker is part of telling the story. So I've noticed that happening a lot more. I mean, one of my favorite.
Ask that question? Yeah, sorry, but there's a danger though with that as well, right? Because if we're going to talk about characters, which I even still feel weird saying, because then the character of the filmmaker that telling the story becomes part of the story, and then can influence things. And I would think that would be. I mean, maybe I'm also looking at that like a journalist, because I never want to become part of the story as well. But yeah, tell us about the film that you were, the filmmaker you were excited about.
Well, I think it's interesting that journalism is like, at least with Overtime, this kind of documentaries, you're not trying to be objective. I think from the start, you're very much saying, this is my view of the story. At least for Overtime, it's like, if I wasn't there, the objective, I don't know. I think it works that I'm there. But yeah, one of my favorite documentaries is the Catfish documentary, and it's called Catfish. And they did the spin-off MTV show. But I love just kind of this feeling that you're so intimate and there with the subject / filmmaker. And I think that's becoming a lot more common, especially now that there's easy access to camera gear, that people are just taking a camera into their hands and bringing it along with them and telling their story. So for me, that's exciting.
You are, as I say, a genre hopper. And I would also say I understand that, Overtime was the first film that, where somebody gave you money, but Breakaway is fantastic. No shade at all to like student films, indie films that you pay for, by your family putting it together or whatever, because the wonderful films are created there. But, so you though, as a documentary filmmaker now who has jumped genres, what advice would you have then for, somebody who has made films in, in the narrative space, but they have they have a parent, or they are friends with somebody or something, who has a remarkable, real life story. And they're like, I'm not a documentary filmmaker, but I want to be the person to, to tell this story. What would you say are some good starting points for them?
Oh, well, I think if it's someone close to your life, I would just start by asking questions and documenting, even just writing down or voice notes about this person's life, and making sure they are also comfortable with potentially sharing this. I think, a big question is why you, and why are you telling this person's story? And if it is someone close to you, then maybe that's the reason why. But I think sometimes the more niche and the more personal the story is, the better. And then finding the universal kind of themes in that and what other people may find interesting or connect to. And then I think everyone has a story to tell. I think everyone's voice is also worthy of telling a story. Like, I think of my mom's story, and she was really hesitant that she didn't think anyone would want to watch it, or that it didn't matter, or wasn't important. But I think, if you care, I think someone else will probably care. That's what I like to think.
Was there anything in the reaction to the film like from the public, from people who aren't in your family? Was there anything in that reaction that surprised you or touched you?
I was honestly surprised how much people did care about my mom. I think people, even if they didn't play hockey or know the hockey world, most people have seen either themselves or someone they know in this story. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was great. And also the kind of comedic moments. I didn't realize how funny people would find some of the moments. So that's been really fun to watch, especially in theaters, is seeing people laugh at certain moments. So that's been surprising for me.
Yeah, intentionally funny moments.
Yeah, intentionally, I'll say. It's intentional. Yeah, we got to make people cry and laugh. So yeah.
It's a whole journey. And I will say this as somebody who isn't like a sports person. I might not be a watching sports person, but, heroic journeys, passions. Like I'm not a fan of sport. I'm a fan of people who love something so intently and who work on it. And that's when we're talking about, the universality. I mean, I think that's really important. Actually, this occurs to me because we were just talking about, sharing stories of people who are close to you. Or is it possible, like over the process of making a film like this, to debrief too much, or like what are the joys and challenges with giving the person who you are, who has trusted you to tell their story, any kind of input in how the story is told? I mean, it's a big conversation that's happening right now in the documentary podcast sphere. There was a podcast that was released recently where this documentary podcaster, instead of like just having people, tell her their stories and then she put it together, edit it and send it out, she had them, provide feedback along the way and decide and did an exploration of what that looks like. And it was fraught with issues, but it raised a lot of questions about like, what is ethical filmmaking? So when you have somebody though you are close with, like, what are some do's and don'ts, I guess, for during the process of making it? Like, what is a good like debrief or good relationship? And then something that is not, could like color the documentary in some way, or it ends up, and especially when you're dealing with your mom and there might be some like not saying there's power stuff, but it's like, that's your mom. I'm in my mid-30s. My mom can still tell me what to do, and it still brings up stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's we just mentioned so many interesting things. I can't imagine showing the subject a cut and having them get feedback. My mom didn't see any cuts. Like, she didn't see anything until we were finished, and that's the way I wanted it, was that she would watch the end product. Yeah. But I do remember being on set, I told her, if you say something that you do not want to end up in the film, tell me. Like, you can tell me afterwards. And there were some moments that came up during the interviews that we did not include in the film that were very vulnerable, raw moments. And I just felt like it didn't serve the larger story. We were opening kind of like a can of worms that we did not address or close. Yeah. So there were definitely moments where I said, you know what, we don't have to go there. Like, we don't have to talk about that. We won't include it. So I think just even on set is like giving them the opportunity to redact something. And then, if I showed my mom the film at the end and there was something she really, really disliked, I would have taken it out. I'm sure I would have. Luckily, there wasn't. But that is tricky in terms of ethics, is you're responsible for telling this person's story, and you have to give them that respect, but they also have to trust you back as a filmmaker that your intentions are good and you're telling their story with the best intentions and in service of them. So that's tricky. I haven't really come into that with anyone else yet, so I'd be curious to hear more about what that podcast said, because I'm still learning how to do this and
how to do this. Yeah.
Well,
that's why these conversations too, like even the one we're having today, are so important. I mean, your relationship with your mom, I mean, is a significant part of the film. It's a significant part of what makes this particular film, so special. How did the process of making this film and then sharing this film with the world, how has that impacted your relationship with your mom?
Mhm. Oh, I love that question. You know, my mom has been on set with me for like my short films. But having my whole family firstly on set and showing them what I love to do and what my world is was firstly really amazing. I think they often see me being very tired or just like working a lot, and they're not quite sure why I'm doing it or what that really means. I mean, I'm sure everyone's been in a family dinner and they're like, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm an indie filmmaker. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that." So to have them come into that world was really nice to share that with them because they've always been so separate. And then I think my mom has come to a lot of the screenings, and I love seeing her get like reactions and kind of people tell her how much they loved the film and they love her journey and respect her journey. And I think that's been really fun for me because that was kind of the goal of the film as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, my mom and I have always been close, but this has been kind of something new that we've got to experience together. And she's living out her childhood dreams, I think. I mean, she got to crank the siren at the Canucks game and do some things with them. So watching her kind of live out this dream while I'm also chasing mine through the film has been a really beautiful thing to do together.
Speaking of children with dreams, and maybe this question just comes to me because of Breakaway, which is, if people can easily find it online, it's a beautiful short film, and it is about children, a girl with a dream. What would you say to if you could go back in time and give yourself the 11-year-old, some wisdom or some feedback or, even like a little glimpse of, what the future holds? Like, what do you think, 11-year-old you would think of, this life that you're building for yourself and this work that you're doing?
That's such another lovely question. I think when I look back to when I was 11 and I was very shy, very introverted, and not very confident, I think I would say, but I always had this love of storytelling. And I remember 11 is a really odd age because girls and people around you are kind of growing up really fast, but you're still a child. So I remember loving a lot of things and like playing with doll houses at 11, but then girls in my grade were very like make fun of me for that. So I think like if I went back to that age, I'd be like, just do what you love. I think there's no shame in kind of holding on to that childlike innocence and that creativity. And as we get older, I think we lose that creativity, or we're forced to allow or not allow our imaginations to kind of run wild. So I think I would just say, like, keep being creative, imaginative. That's the word. Yes.
Yeah.
And and just be patient and just believe that, what's right for you will happen, and just keep, following your own path. That's I don't know.
What would do you think she'd be like, you're a filmmaker? You made a film about mom?
I don't think, because I lived in England at the time, I don't, like, film wasn't even on a radar to me. I didn't even know the industry. So I think she would find it very cool and just very, not something I ever would have thought I'd be in or get to do. So I feel very lucky that I get to do it. Yeah,
fantastic. And you know what? You're still playing just like you did when you're 11. It's just different kind of stuff. All that creativity is important. Okay. Well, we are getting to the end of our time together today. Let's sit with let's really zero in then on overtime. What kind of questions would you like to inspire with overtime? And if not like conversations or questions, like even just, what kind of emotions would you like people to feel, as the end credits are rolling?
I think you said it earlier. It's really a story. It's an underdog story. It's about chasing your passions, even when your passion is something that other people think is ridiculous. So I think at the end of the film, I want people to feel a sense of inspiration, of warmth, and of love. And then a lot of the questions we're asking or themes is a lot about, well, a lot of intersectional things about race, gender, and maybe what's mostly come through is age.
Yeah.
And what that's like to be a woman who's 55 plus in our society, and what they can and cannot do, and how they're seen, if they're seen. I think that's a big part of the film, is women of that age aren't really seen or acknowledged. So just, I think for me, if someone my age, like looking at the film, would be like, respect your parents and your older people around you, and that they have a story too, and they're people outside of being your parents.
Yeah. Respect is also such a huge part of it. Well, I have a lot of respect for you, and a lot of respect for your work, and a lot of respect for your family. Actually, I do have one more little question. What genre would you say your film is? Because, like, as I said in my intro, I mean, if I were to put it in, like, go back into the old-timey, the video stores of yore, go to the Rogers or the Blockbuster. Documentary, sports documentary, but it's so much more, in my view, than that. Like, what would you say? Or is that just an unfair?
Gosh, where would I categorize it? I would say I probably put it on a shelf that's like the best films in the Blockbuster. That's where I put it. But yeah, it's documentary.
Yeah.
It's sports, but it's also kind of biopic. But also like a love story in many ways, like a mother-daughter love story, and then like a passion. My mom's passion for hockey is a love story, and then you see the women on the team and how much they support each other. So I don't know. It's kind of a floating, not in one category.
And beautifully so. And also a love story between your parents. Because that is so...
They're so... Yes. Yes.
I gotta tell to listeners, there is a gift that Jenny's dad gives to Kelly that, like, I was like, that's so romantic.
And that was a moment we did not expect her to cry or any of us to get emotional, and that happened. But yes, husband goals, I would say.
Husband goals. Wow, we got it back to hockey. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the amazing questions.
Well, thank you for listening to the TELUS Originals DocTalks, and to our guest, Jenny Lee-Gilmore. Watch TELUS Originals documentaries at TELUS Optik TV Channel 8 and watch.telusoriginals.com, or follow us at TELUS Originals on Instagram. DocTalks are a production of TELUS Originals. This episode was produced by Sharon Bradley with technical support by Matt Waterworth. Ken Soy is the production executive for TELUS Originals DocTalks. DocTalks are produced on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.